All right, with that said, I'm going to welcome everybody to this workshop. So it's workshop 7B in Behavioral Interventionist Program, A Path Toward Healing for Traumatized Children. This workshop we'll hear from Jennifer Paulsen and Susan Grundberg. Jennifer serves as the president of in-home behavioral programs at FosterAdopt Connect in Missouri and Kansas. She has spent 20 years dedicated to work with at-risk youth in residential programs, including managing an emergency shelter for teens ages 12 to 18. Susan has spent more than 30 years in child welfare and human services and has successfully conceived of and implemented systems and organizational reforms. Before we begin, I'll introduce myself. I am Renee Heddick. I'm a program director here at the Adoptive and Foster Family Coalition, and I'll be the monitor of this Zoom room today. I want to remind everyone that training certificates are available for this conference. You must have your Zoom name listed as the name you'd like to appear on your certificate. I will put the link for the request in the box.
Okay.
And I'll also put other links into the chat box regarding our book table and our conference workshop evaluation. Please know that if you have questions during the workshop, please feel free to put them in the chat box unless the presenter specifically asks you to unmute. Additionally, we are encouraging presenters to provide handouts and slides to be included in our network after the conference. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan and Jennifer, and we can get started. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I guess I'll just kick it off and introduce Jen, although you already did that. But I am Susan Grundberg, and I am in New York and have long been connected to the coalition and benefited from as a parent and as a professional. And as part of my work as an independent consultant now, I am working with some amazing programs to help replicate and hopefully in most cases bring them to New York. And I have been hearing also, like Pat, about the Behavioral Interventionist program for years and just kept thinking, why isn't this in New York? Why isn't this in New York? And then I talked with Lori, who is a dear colleague, and said, like, let me help you replicate this and get this ready. So I have been just working with them to try to get it out there and get it known. And so we appreciate the opportunity to share it here today. And with that, I'm really just the helper here today. I am going to turn it over to Jen to share about this amazing program. Thanks.
Okay, well, hi y'all. My name is Jen, and I am with FosterAdopt Connect. And a couple of just housekeeping things really quickly. First, please stay on mute. I get really distracted pretty easily, and so those background noises will just make me lose my mind. So I would really appreciate that. The second thing is that it is most helpful for us if we know who our audience is. And so we're going to launch a poll that is just one question. How are you connected to adoption foster care? It is helpful for us to understand kind of the direction we need to go. So if y'all take a couple minutes and do that real quick. And then the third thing is that I can talk for an hour and 15 minutes, but my preference is to be able to have a conversation. And so if y'all have questions, please the chat is honestly probably the easiest, and Susan can help keep an eye on that. So be patient if I don't see it right away, because I'll probably ignore it for a hot second. But we really want to be able to have conversations and answer as many questions and listen and hear and get feedback. That will be really helpful for us. So I think without any further ado, we're ready to jump in. And it looks like, just based on what we have from our poll, it's almost split exactly between professionals and adoptive parents. So we're going to hear a lot of different sides of everything today. I'll try and cover it all. Okay, we want to start with FosterAdopt Connect, just so you all know who we are and what we do at this agency. The purpose of our agency is to make sure that our kids who are in adoptive and foster care have a safe and stable environment to live in. We want to make sure that we're supporting the families. We want to make sure that we're supporting the kids. And we want that placement to be stable. And so that's a very big mission. And because it's such a big mission, we have lots of different programs and services. We do services with kinship placement. So if grandma is taking custody of grandkids, we do adoptive placement advocacy. We do a lot of work with fostering. We do licensing. We do support for our kids who are aging out of the system. And we want to make sure that they can go on and continue to be successful. And then there's behavior intervention, which is what we're here to talk about today. And we'll dive into that, but it really is a unique program, and I'm really, really excited about getting to be a part of it. I think it's a really cool program. So it is something that was created some time ago by our executive director. And Susan, you're gonna share that story, yeah?
Okay. One of the things that I love about this model is that it was developed, conceived of, and implemented by a professional who is also, like many of us, adoptive parents. And she had her own child who really struggled with kind of great aggression and many, many behavioral issues, and required institutional or residential care for her safety. So, but as many of you know, that doesn't lead to great outcomes. And as she visited over and over and saw her child not getting better, she went to the state, as this is Lori Ross, who is the CEO of FosterAdopt Connect, and proposed that she develop a program that would help kids stay at home. And ultimately, I think it took a year or so, but ultimately they agreed. And so she proceeded to develop this program with three goals: prevent hospitalization and institutional placements, support families, whether they're kinship, foster, adoptive, or in the community prior to any sort of placement, and to support kids getting home from high-end placements or institutions. And that was her goal, and really the primary goal is to keep kids and families, because that's where they belong and that's where they heal. So that's really where it came from. Lori tells it much better than I do, but she is a fierce advocate if anyone ever has the opportunity to meet her. So
yes, to say the least. All right, so I'm going to give a general description of what behavioral intervention programming looks like, and then we're going to dive into who our kids are, what behaviors we see, what we focus on, how we do these things. So behavioral intervention basically is a one-on-one working with a kid and their family. So we want to make sure, again, the main goal of this program is to make sure that that placement is stable and that we are minimizing hospital stays and residential stays, that we are minimizing disruptions, because that causes future and further trauma that is unnecessary. And we just want to make sure that, if we can and if it is safe, that the kid and the family are given all the tools they need for success. So always the first question is, well, what kind of kids do you serve? And I mean, I think we could probably all speak for days on our kids. These kids I know well. I've worked with them my entire career. So, it's the kids who have experienced pretty significant trauma in their histories. And that trauma shows up as symptoms in their lives. And so that can be things from multiple disruptions of placements to histories of hospital stays and residential stays. It can be having difficulty with attachment, or once they do have attachment, those attachments are disrupted. And what we see from our caregivers who are taking care of our kids is that they are just overwhelmed. I've seen it over and over again. They're overwhelmed, they're stressed, they're at their wits' end. This is what we see from our caregivers. And caregivers can be anybody. The guardianship of the child doesn't matter to this program. So it can be an adoptive kid, it could be a foster kid, it could be a kinship placement, it could be a biological family. That is not of concern to us. So the behaviors we might see, again, we could probably all go on and on about this. Lots of verbal and physical aggression, lots of risky behavior, things that are impulsive and just not well thought out, even more so than age appropriate. Self-harm, suicidal ideation. They have a hard time regulating themselves. They cannot calm themselves down. They don't have the skills to be able to not only regulate, but also just manage the stress that is life, let alone life with a history of trauma and living most likely in state's custody. We do see a lot of young people with multiple mental health diagnoses, complex PTSD, and as our young people grow, what we know is that if they have those diagnoses early and they are medicated, the moment their body grows or the moment their body changes, all of the medication and behaviors change as well. And so that's a constant just space of turmoil that we got to work through as well. And they require a lot of supervision based on their behaviors. So this is who our kids are. And when you lay it out like this, it can look a little daunting and a little hard. But they are also very lovable. They're also fiery, and they are also special, and they also have great potential. And that's one of the things that we want to remember while we're doing this work. Most of our referrals are word of mouth and children's division or whatever the child welfare system is. That's where the vast majority of our referrals come through. We also get referrals from other foster agencies or post-adoption agencies, community prevention programs, mental health, community mental health centers, and those types of things. Okay, so what are the elements of our behavioral intervention program? The first one on here is neurostimulating activities. I'm going to gloss over this because we're going to dive into it in a second. So this is a little more intense, but we'll get to it in a second. So neurostim activities is probably like the backbone of what we do. It is the thing that makes a huge difference. We also really focus on de-escalation. And when we talk about de-escalation, like I talked about, we have kids who have really big behaviors, who have really large escalations, and they can get violent sometimes. There's a lot of aggression behind it because they don't know how to regulate and because they don't know how to even identify what their feelings are. And so that comes out as anger. So crisis de-escalation is a large part of what we do. And a lot of what we do as well is not just in the moment of crisis that we are working on de-escalating, but really tuning in with our kid, really tuning in with the family, with the environment they are in, their home, and making sure that we are aware of what is happening and preventing a lot of that and walking caregivers through how to tune in the same manner and making sure that we are preventing a lot of it. So the third thing we do is external stress regulation. And so that can be anything from us doing like deep breathing with our young people, mindfulness with our young people, but it also might have to do with, paying attention to what the actual environment looks like. If I walk into a therapist office and I'm so overstimulated with the amount of things they have in that office, I'm not going to be able to regulate myself and focus in that situation. And so sometimes it is just about the physical space and making sure that it is a calming space for our young people and it is not something that is furthering what's going on in their brains. We also do a lot of social coaching. This one's always fun, just teaching people how to be friends and good community members. That is always a challenge for someone who, with histories of trauma, we don't have as much trust and we don't believe that people are always good out there. And so learning how to teach those social coaching skills is really something. We also work on daily living activities. This can be things like completing our homework or making sure that our chores are done, or things like hygiene, just how do we take care of our bodies. And as anybody who has had the joy of being around young people who have histories of trauma, those things are very hard for them. That is not number one on their list of things that are important to address. And so getting them in the routine of doing that is really important. And then the last thing that we really work on is obviously we do a lot of very close supervision with our young people, and we do a lot of documentation on all of our cases. If you know, if y'all have ever worked in this field, you know that if it's not written down, it didn't happen. And so we write everything down, and we do a lot of assessments and reassessments, and we track that, and we want to know how we're doing. So that's the basics of BI. What we're going to dive into next is what a behavioral interventionist, I'm going to say BI just because that is such a mouthful, what the BI actually does. So there's a couple of really important things that are always the same with our clients. Lots of things we do with our young people are very gray, very individualized. We want to make sure that you know, we're meeting them where they are, but there are a few things that are absolutely the same. And one of the things that the BIs do that is most beneficial to our caregivers is that by having a BI in the home and having the BI be the one addressing the behaviors and teaching these skills and putting the energy into redirecting and that kind of thing, the caregiver has the opportunity to just be a caregiver. And not to be the one who's harping on or nagging all the time. It gives them a break from that role just enough to where they can start building that positive connection. That positive connection that sometimes is really, really hard because our kids don't know how to do that. And it's you know, the difficulty of the difficulty of that is impacted by the difficulty of building that connection is impacted by the fact that not only are we trying to make a connection, but you're also trying to hold you know, a kid accountable or keep up the structure or whatever that is. So really allowing caregivers to be caregivers is huge. The other thing that I want to really dive into is working with our youth on neurostimulating activities. So you guys are going to get these slides. I want y'all to be able to read them, but I also don't want to just read them for you. I would rather just talk through them as we go through a couple of the other slides. So Susan, will you go on to that next one, the breakdown of the neurostim activities? Perfect. Okay, so neurostimulating activities, what are they? So Dr. Bruce Perry, if y'all haven't heard of him, definitely read his work. He's got a lot of really interesting scientific and very applicable work for this group in particular. So neurostim activities really are making sure that we are rewiring, we're working in a way that helps rewire our brain. And the cool thing about the brain is that while, you know, it fully develops, there is still ways to help it grow and change a little bit, which is amazing. So there's these four major sections of neurostim activities, and really what do they do? A lot of times our caregivers, when we first come into homes, it appears to them that we are just playing with the kids. You know, if you look on the sides of this slide and you look at the activities we're doing sports, board games and card games, dancing, arts and crafts, reading, playing Lego, all of these things just sound like fun. But when we talk about the purpose of them and how we utilize these activities to grow our young people, this is where it gets really cool. So let's just take challenge, for example. So if we want to support a young person's sense of accomplishment and success and help them work on teamwork and that kind of thing, excuse me, we're going to work in this challenge section. So things like building Lego, that is something that you can do as a group. That is something that, you know, is hard and it takes a lot of time, and we get the opportunity to encourage them through that and problem solve through that. And then in the end, we get the opportunity to say, oh my gosh, you did it. Like, that was really hard and you did it. And it also gives us the opportunity that if they get very frustrated in the middle of that and they do start to escalate, then we can move into something else. We can move into, you know, into a second of, hey, let's do some breathing for a second. Let's just pause and let's learn how to, you know, regulate our emotions. And then we can go right back into those Lego. So we're flipping a lot between all of these different neurostim activities. So challenge is one, nurture is another. This is really, a lot of it is about emotional regulation and building a relationship with the person you're working with. This is a great one for caregivers to start with. So when we're doing our role modeling and when we're kind of doing our debriefs at the end of the shift with our caregivers, we're talking about this. You know, this is a quick, this is a quick way to say, hey, if we want to do some fast relationship building, do your nails. Like, that's so nurturing. Do your, you know, read a story with your kid. That is very helpful. Structure, on the other hand, talks about, I see questions coming in, so I'm going to wait for Susan to pause me and tell me when is a good time to answer. So structure is a lot about like a sense of safety. If y'all have worked with young people who have histories of trauma, y'all have heard like structure is so important. It creates safety. This boundary that we are wanting to create is about creating safety. It really is true. Unfortunately, you know, I think all of us really push those boundaries and push that structure. I know I do, even though I'm a grown woman. I still do that. And so I know for a fact that I did it as a kid. And that's developmentally appropriate. So we want to teach them how to follow instructions and see the purpose behind structure and boundaries in a way that is not just shutting them down, right? Because a lot of times that is, with my personal kids, that's what can happen. And so if I'm playing a board game, I can say, oh, the rules say this, we need to follow these rules. So following those instructions, knowing what to expect, structure also provides that. Engagement is one that is very broad and can literally be any activity. The main purpose of engagement is that you are doing it with the young person. And so it could be that I'm doing chores with the young person. So I'm sitting next to them in the kitchen at the sink, washing dishes, they're rinsing the dishes, we're having a conversation while this is happening, really building that connection and that trust piece. That's what engagement is all about. So it can be anything in the whole wide world that you are doing with the young people that is engaging with them.
So there are a couple of questions about this, so why don't we do that right now? Jacqueline is asking if the neurostim activities are similar to therapy activities.
Yes, they are similar to therapy. I am not a therapist, so I am not as familiar with therapy. I cannot speak to it probably as much as actual therapists could by far. But yes, it's very similar to that.
And Jen asks, what can you do if you can't get the child to take breathing exercises seriously?
Well, I've never had a kid not listen to me. I think that's probably the first thing they're going to do. If you're like, let's sit and deep breathe, we're like, okay, crazy. When I work with, my main area is teenagers. That is like my jam. They're my faves. But my kids are a little bit younger. And so when I try and get my kids to do something that has to do with deep breathing or calming, I normally give them something that, you know, I definitely don't say, hey, let's just sit down and count to 10 and breathe. That's definitely not what I'm going to want to do. I want to do something that's engaging with them. And so those poppets that come along, right? Getting a circle, one of those, and getting them to, you know, pop all the circles as they breathe in and pop all the circles as they breathe out. They're not going to get it right away. And it'll take some practice and they'll get there, and that's fine. The fact that they're just learning how to get in the motion of regulating their breath. The other thing is that we all know that not everything works for everyone. Deep breathing for me personally doesn't work very often, and it probably just makes me mad. Like, I'm just not, it's just not what I do. But I definitely have other things that I do that help me like focus and be mindful and ground myself a little bit. And so everybody always asks me, you know, well, what about this? What if you don't do this? What if you, I have a toolbox. Like, I have lots of options. I have lots of things. So if I know deep breathing is not going to work, cool. Let's get a noodle fidget and let's do something else. Let's do, you know, if breathing's not going to work, maybe let's go stomp around in the yard. Maybe let's just take our shoes off and stand in the grass. So any of those types of things, I come in fully prepared. I think that's one of the most important things that we need to make sure we're doing when we're working or living with young people is that we are prepared for what's going on. And I know that takes a lot of energy because I know that takes a lot of energy. And it's one of the most helpful things. Was there any others, Susan? I saw other stuff coming in, but.
Oh, there were comments on your response. So
Okay, cool.
should we move on?
Okay. Are we ready, do you guys think, for the next one? Okay, so who is a BI? Hands down, the most important thing, in my personal opinion, the most important characteristic, excuse me, of a BI is that they are really passionate and really flexible. You gotta love kids to work with kids with this level of challenges. That's just what it is. You also have to be flexible. You have to be able to switch real quick and think on your feet. Those types of characteristics are the ones that I find most effective. RBIs have to have a minimum of a high school diploma. We love for them to have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's not a requirement though, because we understand college can be hard for some folks and it might not be accessible to everyone. That doesn't mean you're not skilled. I also know that just because you go to college doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to be flexible or that you have passion. And so we want to be as flexible as we can with who we hire. RBIs also work part-time or full-time. So most of RBIs are part-time, and the reason for that is because that's when kids are available. They're in school all day. We're there in the evening, afternoon, evening, with them during the week, and then longer hours during the weekend. We love for them to already have experience working with big behaviors. Some people, you can tell, just kind of have it innately in them, but most people, we don't want this to be their first experience with big behaviors because they are working on their own in a home, really one-on-one with a kid. And while we do supervision and we are available for our staff, we're not in that space with them. And so we want to make sure that they're prepared, they understand what they're walking into. Lots of collaboration happens. We work as a team, and I cannot stress that enough. We work as a team. A lot of conversations, a lot of staffing, a lot of problem solving. I mean, just that question we saw earlier, like, I can't get my kid to do this deep breathing. What else should I try? Great, let's collaborate. Let's talk about what we can do. That really is how we work. Lots of interpersonal skills as well, making sure they're a good communicator, because we have caregivers that we want to make sure see us as a support, see us as not somebody who's coming into their house judging them. We are not child welfare coming to snatch your kids away. Like, we really are here to be supportive. And so that interpersonal connection is also important with the families. And then a lot of times we've had really good referrals from families themselves. You know, they have somebody who they're close to who has, you know, a special connection with their kid and also the skills needed. So caregivers can also be the referral source for great BIs. Did I miss anything on there? I don't think so.
No, you didn't miss anything. Emily asked if there is just one BI assigned to a family, or if it's like 7 days a week, or how does that work?
That's a great question. Yeah, thank you. So our part-time BIs are required to work at least 15 hours a week. So that's usually 3 shifts, maybe 4 shifts. So the way we do it is based on how many hours they qualify for services. So if their behaviors are really big and pretty intense help is needed, they're going to get 40 hours of service per week. If their behaviors are a little less, they're going to get about 20 hours of service a week. And so it's based on what the young people need, what the families need. And so if we have a kid who has 40 hours a week available, and we have a part-time BI who can work 15 hours at the beginning of the week and a part-time BI who can work 20 hours at the end of the week, we will give them 2 separate BIs. What we don't want to happen is we don't want just one BI going in for just one day and then not going again for a week. So we're willing to share and to split up families, but our absolute goal is that the consistency among the BIs. So it's going to be the same folks in their home on the same days, at the same times. It's part of that structure and safety piece. We want to make sure that our kids know what to expect with somebody coming in and working with them, but we also want to create that safety for our caregivers and our families and make sure that they understand who is coming into my house. I can build a relationship with them. And that relationship is really what matters. And if we don't have that connection, if we don't have that consistency with our BIs, then that's a missing piece that is so pivotal to our work. So very long-winded answer. I'm sorry about that. But yes, 1, maybe 2 BIs per kid. Okay, so a lot of people ask us, well, how long do you give services? What's your average length of service? This is not an easy thing to answer. And the reason it's intentionally not easy. I'm not going to lie. The reason it's not easy is because we are not a cookie cutter program by any means. We want to make sure that our families are being served the way our families need to be served. And none of them are the same. None of our kids are the same. None of our caregivers are the same. None of their situations are the same. And we work with just a wide range of challenges. And so some of our kids might only take 6 months and they just find that internal motivation. The caregiver is on board. They're listening right away, picking up everything that we're role modeling for them. And they kill it. They're in and out in 6 months. Some of our families just take longer. Sometimes it is more intense and there are more steps to reach those goals. And sometimes there is, more hesitation on part of the caregiver of, well, who is this person coming in? Like, what do they actually know? There's barriers between us and our caregivers sometimes. And so those people might be around 18 months or 2 years. Our average is about a year. That's the easiest way to describe it, because the goal of our program is to meet our families where they are, plan for what they need, and work toward those goals that everybody has agreed on. Another question we get a lot is, what's the demographics? As you guys can see, most of our kids in our program are either foster kids or adoptive kids. Family of origin is the next biggest one, and then kinship or guardianship, which is, that grandma taking care of grandkids. A lot of when I started, I was very surprised about the age of services that were started. And I was surprised in the best way. 7 to 11 is most of our kids, which I love, because like I said earlier, teenagers are my area of expertise, and it is challenging to teach an old dog new tricks. And so getting to them a little bit younger and helping their brain rewire that early, man, that's life changing. You're not walking into your teen years where developmentally you are learning what autonomy is, and you're separating from everybody and you're creating your own things, and you don't have the ability to make those good decisions. If we can get them a little bit earlier, then we make a difference sooner. And I think I saw a question come up that I wanted to.
Yes, training and support for BI.
Training and support. Thank you, Emily. Really, really good question. So training and support is something I personally am very passionate about. I do not believe we should ever send our staff into homes, or into conversations or situations without being prepared. I just told you, we have a wide toolbox. I want that toolbox to not just be things we do with our kids, but also how do we take care of ourselves? How do we interact with our families? How do we interact with professionals? So training is very important to me. So training for us, it takes about 2 weeks for training to happen all the way for our new BI staff. That's part-time or full-time. And we do a lot of conversations around trauma, in particular. What is trauma? What can we expect to see as behaviors, as symptoms of trauma? What mental health looks like, what mental health diagnoses look like, what medications might be used, how do you know what side effects could be possible, How do you watch out for those just developmental changes as you grow bigger and everything changes, and then you have to reevaluate everything all over again. We talk about that. We talk about de-escalation is a huge piece of what our training is, and 90% of our de-escalation training is actually focused on preventative, and only 10% is focused on safety holds. We really focus on tuning in to our clients and our families and their households and making sure that we are aware of what is going on so that we are able to work toward preventing that and getting those caregivers involved in working towards preventing that. Of course, we do training on documentation. We have assessments. We have assessments that we go through. We have trainings once a month with all of our staff all together on top of that first 2 weeks training. So that's what training looks like. Support on the other end, it can look like a lot of different things. The thing that is most important, oh gosh, no, I can't even say that. There's lots of important things. I think our frontline staff are so very important. And a lot of people forget how hard their jobs are and what they do. So our frontlines, our BIs, have their supervisors who are always available for emergencies. So let's say they're working in the evening and a kid runs away from home, or there's such a big escalation that the kid has to be admitted to the hospital. Those kinds of really big situations, our supervisors are available for processing in the moment, and they are absolutely more than willing to do that. And that's one of my favorite things. We want to make sure that they are not just like sitting with that and trying to go on with life, you know, without having at least somebody to talk to. They are available 24/7. They also have bi-weekly supervision, individual supervision. So every 2 weeks, they have a one-on-one conversation with their supervisor, and that can be used for anything. That can be used, I absolutely want it to be used for praise. It can also be used for constructive feedback. It can be used for problem solving. You know, I've got this situation, I can't figure out how to teach this skill or whatever. It can be used for venting sometimes, because I bet every single person on this call right now has needed a space to vent when it comes to challenging behaviors. So those things. One of the other biggest supports that we give our BI staff in particular is that we provide benefits for them, whether they're full-time or part-time. And that's a really important piece as well, as we want them to understand that for us, you are very important and we are investing in you as much as you are investing in our community. And so they get like health, dental, vision, 401, all of that jazz.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And there is another question. I'm gonna hold it till the end. So let's move on to outcomes.
Outcomes. Who's not excited about outcome? Let's see if I can make this one interesting. Okay, outcomes. So how do we measure what we're doing, right? Like, oh, so much of it can be so subjective, and no, yeah, they're doing better. But we actually have to be able to measure these things so that we can show our funders, and so that we can show our caregivers, and so that we can show our kids, right? Like, you're making progress. Look at this. This is amazing. And when you have it in black and white like that, it really does make a difference. So again, our goals are to decrease placement changes, so make sure the placement is stable, and to make sure that we're decreasing hospitalizations and residential placements. So we do this by doing a couple of things. I'm sure some of the folks on here, if not all of you, have heard of the CAFS, which is, Child Adolescent Emotional Functioning Scale, CAFS. And it goes through 7 different domains and discusses how are they doing in these spaces. So how are they doing at school? How are they doing socially? How are they doing with family interactions? And this assessment is done at the first time we talk to them on the phone, and then it's done every 6 months after that. That's the way all of our assessments are done. So we're able to really measure those, and that is youth reported, and that's caregiver reported, and that is BI reported. Again, with that teamwork, we get everybody involved. The other thing we want to do is we want to make sure they're increasing their daily living assessment scores. The DLA is another assessment that we use that kind of talks about life skills. And so we want to make sure that they are increasing that score as well. And when we talk about increasing, we're not talking about a measured increase. Like you have to move up 10 points before you can be seen as successful or making progress. We do celebrate those small victories because that's really important, especially when, you know, a lot of our kids and caregivers, honestly, just those victories are so few and far between. So we need to celebrate those. And then we also have an internal caregiver assessment that we give all of our caregivers, again, at the first phone call and every 6 months after that. That's how are they doing with what these challenges are, you know, it's asking questions like, I have to avoid family get-togethers, or none of my friends or family will, you know, watch my kid if I need to go to the doctor, those kinds of things. And so we're assessing what the impact of the behaviors is on the family or on the caregiver themselves. And then I don't think we even said anything about this, did we, Susan? So we're in a study with the University of Kansas, which is pretty intense, and we provide lots of data, and it's helpful because it shows us these numbers, which is really helpful. So over the past 3 years, 80% of our kids have decreased going to a residential care center after BI services. 76 have decreased going to a hospital after BI services, and 74 have decreased just any kind of placement changes during BI services. These are big deals. This is, you know, we had a hunch it was working really well, and we thought we had the information, and being able to work with the University of Kansas on this study in particular has done nothing but just like fuel us even more. Like, holy cow, this is working. So overall, what we're seeing is that it's working the way we expected it to work. Our kids are staying stable. Our kids are able to stay in the placements they're in. And, you know, they're able to build those relationships and build those families. And it's really amazing. So we have a couple of success stories. Susan, can you do one so I can just like get a little bit of a drink?
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So Jessica's story. Jessica, I know many people are concerned about post-adoptive services, and Jessica was 11 and living in a pre-adoptive home, but her behavioral challenges and emotional challenges were really kind of putting things on edge. So she started BI services in 2019. You know, as you can see here, she had really explosive behaviors. She was breaking things, hitting and kicking. I'm sure some of you have experienced that. And through their experience with BI, they were able to kind of finalize the adoption. Things were stable enough so that everyone was able to go through with that. I think what Jen talked a little bit about, but you know, through the modeling and the coaching that the caregivers get, that her parents really were able to then, even though it's really a one-on-one intervention for kids, her parents were really able to apply a lot of those de-escalation techniques and communication skills themselves. So her relationships have improved. They spend one-on-one time together. She's able to manage her frustrations better, and she no longer damages property. So, and then just like Jen said, they were able to be discharged from the BI program as well. That's just one example.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. So Josiah is another one of our examples. And I love a good 15-year-old boy, man. They're challenging anyway, but you add a history of trauma and it just gets a lot more challenging. So Josiah was living with his grandma, lots of behaviors, wasn't taking school seriously, really not paying attention to class. not, getting the grades he needed to get. He was also verbally and physically aggressive towards his grandma and sibling at home. He was choosing not to do the chores, really just very disengaged from anything he was asked to be doing. And so we started working with him through BI, and the physical aggression has completely stopped. And the vast majority of his verbal aggression has as well. He has learned how to self-regulate, work with coping skills. That's the word that's used here. A lot of that self-regulation. He's just learned how to respond to things rather than react to things. Through a lot of different things, we found out that he loves virtual learning. And so rather than actually attending school, he's been really successful with attending school online. And he's done a lot better with that. He's gotten a job, and he is getting paid while he's doing his, schoolwork. And he's pleasant, Grandma says. So they graduated in December, so that's been like 5 months. And he's doing really well. It's a big change. It's a big change. I think the next thing we have, if I remember right, yeah. So this is our parents. Go ahead, Susan.
Well, we want to make sure we have the voice of parents, and I may have made a rookie mistake and forgotten to put the sound button when I shared this. So I'm going to try it, and just somebody raise your hand if you are not hearing sound. And if that's the case, I'm going to stop, and I'm going to let Jen answer a question while I do that. So I'm going to try this.
Susan, there's no sound.
Okay. I was afraid of that.
All right. Well, Susan,
Here in the video, there's a
Yeah, I know. I blew it.
Okay.
Even though I practiced, I forgot that.
we could try it again.
Okay, here we go. Okay. Let me know. Whoops. See.
As a mom, we struggle a lot with connecting with our child. And so I think, can you do this? Can I cry? Is that okay? Our goal, our ultimate goal, is to connect with this child. And when our BI can come in and see that and communicate that with us and step into those hard situations with our kids, then we can take a breath. We can take a breath and allow that connection to come back around with our kid. And that's the end goal, to connect with our kids so that this family can function better than before. But when that BI can talk about that, and when that parent can take that breath and say, at the end of the day, we connected with our child better than we did before. That's what makes a big difference.
This is a tough topic to talk about.
It really is. Yeah, because we've struggled
That's
a long
good
time
question.
with a couple of our kids to just figure out how do we, the simplest things, how can we make that easier for this kid to accomplish and not reject everything we say and not reject us as a parent. And when that BI can come in and see that's our heart, it really makes all the difference. And man, those BIs need to hear that too. They need to hear that. It makes a difference.
Having the discussions around what are the struggles, but also what have been the small wins, the little victories that you've seen happen.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when
We have hard kids. We have really hard kids.
sorry. Sometimes when the struggles are so big, it's hard to see the little victories.
And sometimes your BI points out those victories that you didn't see because you've struggled too much.
Yeah.
And they can bring a positive aspect to that
Yeah.
struggle. We've had some amazing VIs.
We have.
Yeah.
Mainly our son has taken a lot of focus away from our other kids. We end up spending a majority of our time concentrating our energy on redirection, keeping everybody safe, and trying to maintain a balance. But therefore, we've neglected some of our parental duties for paying attention to our other kids. So having the BI in there has been a huge help. It's allowed us to take a step back and focus on the family again, kind of bring everybody back in touch, back together. And I mean, also for us, to help us kind of gather ourselves back up again. I mean, life is hard and it changes daily. So to have just that little extra help in the house and in our lives has made a really big difference, just on the overall quality of our life.
Thanks, Susan.
Okay, I guess you heard it.
Yeah, we all heard it. It was good.
Okay, so I figured we would just talk, and feel free to come off of, put your videos on or whatever.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions, yes?
Yes, you do.
Okay, so the first one is from Michelle. It says, do you work with clients, schools as well? We would love to. Sometimes schools can be a little more challenging. So where we are, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, by the way, that's where I'm based. So where we are, our schools have funding specifically for these services. And so what we have to do is we have to kind of walk parallel to that. We can't go into schools because that is double dipping. They already have services in that space. We can't provide the same service to the same kid with the same funding. And so we have to walk parallel with that. But we do a lot of collaboration with schools, and we come up with like behavior plans and that kind of thing. Like we can do a conference with schools and help them kind of problem solve and let them know, hey, this is what we've seen that's been really helpful and that the kids responded well to. But we can't actually go into the school and be with the kid in the classroom.
And Pat is asking about the hourly rate and how do you recruit?
I'm so excited to answer this question. This is something I listen. Oh man, I am a fighter for. RBIs make well above minimum wage. Well above minimum wage. Our minimum wage in Kansas City, I believe, is $13. And RBIs start at 20. It's very intentional. They do very hard work. They are excellent at what they do, and they deserve to get paid that money. Yeah. And do we try to recruit people who with lived experience? Oh yeah, like yeah. I have always loved hiring people with lived experience. I think that sometimes that can be a challenge based on how much they themselves have healed and grown. But if we have a healed human who has lived experience, absolutely, absolutely worth it. There's nothing that can compare to that expertise level. I mean, you can go to school for 20 years and never learn that.
Yeah. And might also be difficult waiting for somebody to heal rather than have maybe a built-in program to support them if they want to work for you, but they might be struggling a little bit.
Yeah. And if they're, I mean, as long as they're in a healthy space, let me say that. They don't have to be all the way healed, but if they're in a healthy space, yes.
Is anyone ever all the way healed?
That's right. You're waiting for that, forget about it.
Yeah, no, it's not happening. All right, what other questions do y'all have?
Wow.
Oh my gosh, come on.
Not at all.
Renee, I'm stunned.
Where is everybody?
How are we funded? It's a good question. We receive VOCA funding. And that pays for about 30 to 40% of our clients. So that's federal funding. And then we also receive LINK funding, which is a state funding through our child welfare system. And that pays for about, 60 to 70% of our kids. We also have services in the state of Kansas, and we have a placement stability grant that's a federal grant. It's administered by the state of Kansas, but that pays for almost all of our kids in Kansas as well. So it's all grant funding and private, obviously, like donations and things like that. But yep.
I can add to that we really believe that a lot of this should and can be funded through Medicaid. So we have gone through a year-long process with PCG to figure that out and to do an environmental scan and to figure out, there are certainly some states that could easily cover it. And we've had lots of talks with managed care organizations about how to do that. I think that there are codes in CFTSS in New York that would absolutely qualify. Maybe it would need a waiver about the amount of hours. So I do, I think the way to make this accessible is to make it through Medicaid. And so there is some advocacy to do there in whichever state we do that in.
Yep. Yeah. Jacqueline, you asked, what do the kids think of you as? I'm assuming you're asking, what do the kids think of you all? Let me know if that's not right. Yeah,
like
okay, good.
Or something, or
no, yeah, that's so what do the kids think of us? I mean, I think we probably have our good days and bad days, right? Like any other person who works with kids. Our main focus is our relationship with the kids, and we know that sometimes that means we get to do really fun things with them, and we get to teach them things in fun ways, and then also sometimes that means that we're holding them accountable and challenging them a little bit. And so I would say 80% of the time they like us a lot. On those hard days though, they're good at exposing their feelings. What do they think of us as, like, counselors, sitters, and behavior people? Well, we're definitely not sitters. Counselor, we could use that loosely, maybe. Definitely not professional counselors. I would say, behavior people is probably the closest descriptor to us, because we are really focused on helping them grow and figure out how to get to the root of the behavior rather than just focusing on the behavior and helping them manage those emotions that are feeding that behavior.
So Jen, how do you pitch this to a 13-year-old that there's going to be somebody spending 15 hours a week with them?
13-year-olds. I would always go with honesty. I mean, hey man, you're having some problems here. Like, let's figure it out, right? Let's figure out how to make sure that you're not cussing your grandma out. Let's figure out how to make sure you're not running away every day. Let's, let's start caring about who we are, our hygiene and our nutrition and our physical activity. So I really think that just sometimes especially with teenagers, radical honesty. You clearly know you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Come on, let's do it together. And sometimes they're resistant, but we're also very particular about who we match our kids with, like what staff we put with what kids. We ask a lot of questions around that, both at our interviews of our BIs and our frontline staff, and of our caregivers. Like, who is this kid? What do you think they would respond to really well? Are there any absolute triggers that we need to be aware of, and we cannot make, we have to make sure it's not in the house. We have one kid who no one who walks into the home is allowed to wear Old Spice. Okay, that's an avoidable trigger. Crisis de-escalation done, right? But we want to match personalities. We want to match skill set. We want to match energy levels a lot of times. You're talking about a 5-year-old, that's a much different energy level than most, 15, 16-year-olds. So yeah.
So Jen, there's another question sort of on the theraplay angle, which I think it's important that this is, a one-on-one intervention that's not therapy, but how it's not qualified like that. And maybe you could talk about the NMT assessments when they're available, or that it could be added, but also how do you work with kids therapists and stuff alongside if they're in therapy?
Yeah. So yes, this is definitely not therapy. Absolutely not therapy. We are not addressing trauma directly head on like therapy does. We are addressing the symptoms of the trauma, the symptoms of what is coming out because of that trauma. We 100% refer to therapy, go to a therapy, or a therapist. We just started our own clinical program. This is Pat just said, have you guys ever thought about using neurofeedback? We just started our own clinical program, and they are being trained in that right now. So yes. And we work alongside as much as we possibly can the therapist. Again, this is a huge team. It is a collaboration among everybody, whether it's, just the BI team, or it's the BI team and the family, or it is their larger service team. We want to work alongside the school. We want to work alongside the therapist. A lot of that does depend on what the caregiver is willing to allow us to do. Obviously, we have to have releases of information. We have to have permission and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's going to be more effective if we can work alongside each one of those different service providers. And if they're hearing what we're doing and we're hearing what they're doing, then we can work together in that way. And that's going to be more effective.
There are no more questions in the chat.
Yeah, I'm reading the rest of that one.
Oh, right. Renee, what is longitudinal impact? Or what is provided to the parents?
I'm sorry, where is that one?
It was scrolled up and then I missed it. So kind of what supports and trainings are provided to parents and caregivers?
Oh man, you know what? This is a weak link in this program. This is one of the things that we're focused on right now. We are doing as much as we can. Our main focus is working one-on-one with the kid. We normally debrief. There's a few things that we have in place already. I think we can do better. So we have family coordinators, and their job is to be the support of the family, the caregivers, making sure that we're touching base with them at least weekly. Most of the time it's twice a week that we hear from caregivers or that we reach out to them. And that can be anything from, recognizing resources in the community, providing that, just a space to have an adult to talk to about what's going on. Have, an ear sometimes is enough. But it also allows our team to be able to ask questions. How are things going with these services? We're not asking the BI. We're not asking in front of the BI. We really want to provide a separate space for families to be able to really speak freely about what's going on, because it can be hard to share that feedback if it's not going well in front of your staff. So we have those coordinators. They reach out. They are wonderful, and they are gentle, and they are magical, in my personal opinion. We do, though, this is an area that we've got to get better at. Our parents need more support, and I think that's one of the things that's really become evident over the last couple of years, is that they do feel really alone, and they do feel isolated and like they're on an island, and that is in fact not the case. There's so many people like them, and so we want to make sure that they know that. Also, just we want to be able to start providing a little more parent education so that they understand hey, this is what trauma is, you know, like a lot of, I think specifically kinship placements, the families, they don't have training. They don't know what's going on. They're just like, this is my grandkid. Of course I'm going to take care of them. And then that's it, you know? And so that is an area that we need to get better at. We have a solid foundation and we need to grow in that area.
And Renee asked about the longitudinal sort of impact, and I think we don't quite know that yet. That's part of what the University of Kansas study will be about. So we're in like year 3 is done, but I think that's sort of to be determined. Would you agree with that, Jen?
Yeah, I think we're still, I mean, we can guess as much as we want to guess, but I think if we're going to speak intelligently about it, we should probably hold for the full length.
So I don't see any more questions. Any of the coalition folks have any last words?
I just want to thank Susan and Jen for presenting today. We've all learned a lot about your program and its success. So we appreciate you being with us today.